I mean, the same thing applies here in Sweden. They have privatized. We had a brilliant working phone company, that was owned by the government basically. About a few years, they sold it all out, and it's become basically junk since then. So.
Yes. Yes. Well, you see, this privatization is a joke because they are taking assets that were paid for by the taxpayers.
Yes.
And you see, what this does is, well, I don't know about you in Sweden, but here in the United States, it moves us into feudalism.
Yeah.
Because people still will pay their taxes. They will not get any services for it. And they will have to pay, they will lose assets because they're being transferred from the books of the government to this new public-private partnership. And so the bottom line is they will end up paying higher fees. They will continue to pay taxes. They will not get any benefits. I mean, hey, that's feudalism.
Yeah. So would you say, Joan, that the overarching idea here, because again, this ties in, as far as I've been able to figure this out so far, the game plan is to kind of bring in more socialism in that regard on these types of levels, but yet it's going to be kind of a merger system between capitalism and socialism, and it seems to be that China is setting kind of the role model of what we're going to get throughout the world. What's your take on that?
Well, it's very interesting. Early on, I interviewed this person at the 5-year follow-up, the Rio Plus 5 meeting in 1997. Now, for your listeners, let me just say something. I have breadth and depth, and if I go back to 92 or 94 or 97, which seems a long time ago, what that has done is given me the foundation to understand and to be able to work from a bigger, broad view than somebody who doesn't know this information.
Right.
Now, having said that, we end up having, so I did this interview with this guy, and I was absolutely dumbfounded. You see, one of the things that was very difficult for me when I first started covering global meetings was, as an American, I did not know what socialism was.
Okay.
I knew a little bit about communism, rule by force, but I had no idea of socialism, rule by rule. And that was the hardest thing for me to understand as I started covering these global meetings. And this person described sustainable development as a merger between capitalism and communism.
Right.
And so when you take a look at the statement you just made, that's really where we're going. We're going into this hybrid of capitalism. And you see right now in America with the Federal Reserve, with the government nationalizing the banks, and now they're looking at other industries, that all of a sudden people are saying, excuse me, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean?
Right.
And they are horrified.
Because a lot of people have, complained that the Federal Reserve is, for instance, is a privately owned entity.
It is.
But the fact is now then, are you saying that they're trying, I don't know if we should even tie in the Federal Reserve in the argument you're making here, but does that suggest that they're now trying to make that into a government entity or owned by the state, or is that wrong?
Whoa. Well, you see, what's really happening, and this brings us to the G20, and this brings us to the global credit crises.
Yes.
And let me just say for your listeners, if they will go to my website, womensgroup.org, WOMENSGROUP, womensgroup.org, we have a number of videos, and maybe you guys know all this and don't need my videos, but one is called 21st Century Feudalism, and that does go into public-private partnership. Then we have the 2008 credit crises, and over the weekend I did a presentation on from Bretton Woods 1 to Bretton Woods 2. And it is what we are seeing is that government has become obsolete. The people in Congress, over a period of years, now we're talking from 1913, have little by little legislated away or given away their powers to the Federal Reserve.
Mm.
And the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. As you know, every country has a central bank.
Yes.
You have, in Sweden, my goodness,
the oldest
you had
one.
the original central bank of central banks.
I know.
And that's where the idea began. And then it went to Holland, and then it went to the Bank of England, and little by little around the world. And so the central banks are all owned by the same small group of powerful families, including the British royal family. Now, I'm going to assume, but I don't have proof, that the Swedish royal family also controls your central bank. But I don't have proof. Do you?
No, I don't have any proof for that either. That would be conjecture, but it should fit into the image that we're kind of slowly building here as we begin to study some of these families and what they've been up to, so to speak, over the years. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, yes. I was very fortunate. Somebody called me up one day and they said, you must buy. It was called Crown and Country, and it was done by Queen Elizabeth's youngest son, Prince Andrew. He had a movie company for a while,
mm-hmm.
and he did a video on different aspects of British history, and he did one on the Bank of England. And he explains that his great, however many, grandfather, King William, was one of the largest investors in the Bank of England.
Mm.
And he even shows the document which King William signed, showing that he invested £10,000.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
And I thought, well, my goodness, it doesn't take a genius to know that if the British royal family, who knows how to make money out of a turnip, if they invested in the Bank of England, then of course they've also invested in all the other central banks, which came after the Bank of England, you know.
Mm.
And so we are really in a major takeover by the central banks of the world. They have played roulette, or they have played the gambling game called craps. I don't know what it's called in Sweden, but you throw dice and you have different numbers on the board, and then this guy takes a sweeping stick, it's called. You sort of like, it looks like almost like a broom, and he sweeps all the chips off to whoever won. Well, we have the central banks of the world, and they have played their game craps on the global level,
mm-hmm.
and they are in the process of taking that sweeping stick, and they're sweeping to themselves the industry, the banks, the assets of the world, and of the various countries to themselves.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I see in America, and not only America, but worldwide.
Yes.
So the question then becomes, what is the role of government if banking is more powerful?
Yeah, and what would you answer to that?
Well, the answer is that there has been a shift through the central banking system of the power of government from government to the central banks.
Mm-hmm.
And that when we look at world government, although you have the United Nations, and the United Nations is a world governmental organizing agent, and it has been used just like the IMF and the World Bank and the World Health and the World Trade and all the other UN organizations, it has been used to get various cabinet-level positions, whether it's the Treasury Secretary, whether it's the Education Minister, whether it is the Foreign Minister, whether it is the Transportation Minister, whether it is the Health Minister, to meet with all their counterparts from all the other countries of the world, whether it's at the World Health or the World Trade or the IMF or the World Bank or the UN or what have you. And so they've been legislating away their power, and they've been creating an international level of world government through international law. And so at the same time, you have this organizing structure on one hand, you also have the power and the money of the central banks on the other. And now you're really seeing a major global coup d'etat. This is a major global coup d'etat of epic proportion.
Sorry, continue.
And most people do not understand it. They do not see it. They're scratching their head.
Yeah.
But for anybody who understands the international level, this is what it is.
We hear these kinds of wording now where everyone from President Nicolas Sarkozy of France and Gordon Brown of Britain are talking about a new world economic order after this so-called, what I would consider to be a artificially created economic turmoil that we are in now. But
yes.
Do you consider that what we're seeing rather right now then could it be like the final step in this process, or is this just another stepping stone? Where does this take us, so to speak? Well, what do you think the solution is that they're going to bring in now?
Well, you have to get my latest video from Bretton Woods 1 to Bretton Woods 2, because that's exactly what it's all about. The new international, new NIEO. See, they had that back in, was it the 60s or 70s? And so this is a new term being reinvented again. The new international economic order. And, it is. Sarkozy is correct. But you see, he's brand new to the international level. He hasn't been in office that long, nor has Gordon Brown. And so what is really, in essence, happening is all these dummies, I'm looking for the word.
Well, that's a good word.
Puppets.
Yeah.
They're all trying to make their mark,
Yeah.
I mean, come. Who in the heck is Sarkozy to call for a global meeting like the one we had this last weekend? What a joke. What an absolute joke. So let's go back to, the agenda. This has been set up for a very long time. It started at Bretton Woods 1. Before Bretton Woods, every country was its own country. They did not participate at the UN. They did not have an IMF World Bank. They were all independent. They all produced for their own country and for their own welfare and benefit. Okay? Then you had the IMF set up in 1944, the United Nations in 1945, the World Trade in 1994, the International Criminal Court in 98. You had some other things set up in between. You have what is now called a borderless world created basically in the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look at what Bill Clinton did, my goodness, he should be given the Order of Lenin for all the things he did to change the American structure of government into world government.
Mm-hmm.
And George Bush, too, he did his own fair share. He was no wallflower. And now we are really at the final point. So what is the final point? What is the final barrier between countries? Well, in order to have the final barrier torn down, you have to create a global crisis of the magnitude that we currently have. And so that means all the international banks and the international bankers get to rape, rob, and pillage because it's all part and parcel of the agenda. And they're having a merry old time, and that's exactly what they're doing. And as such, we have a situation whereby the last structure that has to be put in place in order to finalize a world governmental structure is that every country has to change their national financial, banking, insurance, mortgage laws from national laws
Mm-hmm.
to international law. And that's exactly what they're going for. That's exactly the whole purpose of the G20. It's not only to give power to the Financial Stability Forum, but it is also to get every country to change from national laws to international or global regulatory laws. And, of course, the country that already has it, countries